Okay, let's go into this real quick. So you guys know I'm on the farm. You guys know that I was bitten by a bunch of hornets yesterday. You guys can tell my face is obviously red. You can tell my neck is swelling out of its side of it. But I was asked to go ahead and do a review of this video. And here's the kicker with this. This video is interesting to me because it's from an Alabama politician. Now, you have a swing of what types of politicians you can have in America. You have California politicians. They will talk to you sweetly with their little slippery tongues and deliver to you this beautiful package that is ultimately horrible for you, right? You have that where they play that card. And then you have the brutal, honest, aggressive, slams you in the face truth of the Deep South kind of politicians where they just don't play games, which is ironic because in the Deep South, you can have somebody, like a mother-in-law be brutal to you, but sweet as pie. But in California, that same mother-in-law will not be sweet as pie. So it's like when you have a flip of the politicians, but the politicians in California, they'll come out with this beautifully worded bill. So lovely, so adorable, so cute in its writings. And then when it hits you, you realize that's a terrible idea, a horrible idea. How could I ever be part of this? And so you have the opposite of that with essentially places like Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, the backwater states. People have asked me to go ahead and do essentially an assessment on this video. And I didn't go into it, but I'm going to go into it now. We're going to play it real quick so you can kind of tell exactly what's going on. Here's a gentleman, a senator, and what he had to say. Okay, here we go.
This is all a scam. I mean, we got people that's getting ready to retire that's going to try to live off $2,000 to $3,000. Impossible. It's impossible. Because what happens, it comes up here, we spend it. We're $35 trillion in debt. We don't have any money. We're dead broke. And then taxpayers have $2 trillion in credit card debt. We are in huge trouble. In this body, we had better start figuring that out because we're going to have a run on this city here soon, and there's going to be about 150 million people coming up here saying, where's our damn money that we paid in? I could have put my social.
Okay, so the riot control aspect, and he's not wrong. So there's 70 plus 72-ish million individuals currently on Social Security benefits. He has doubled that number when it comes to the amount of people who will actually show up to demand what's going to happen, because he's inflating that number based off of how many individuals are likely going to complain, because you have a lot of people on Social Security benefits right now, but you have a hell of a lot more people in the future, in their 50s, 40s, 30s, who have expectations that they will be able to obtain their Social Security benefits. So the problem with this situation is that the politicians are starting to wake up and realize that things are epic bad. Now, what's interesting about that is that people will claim on YouTube in the chat section that I'm literally fear-mongering by showing them or saying this, or how dare they this. The truth is, the actual level of how bad it is far worse than I've ever really gone into detail with. Right now, the SSA, through their own website, is working on, this is from ssa.gov/OACT/solvency/provisions/cola.html. From their own website, okay, from the SSA website, provisions affecting cost of living adjustment. They went and created an assessment page on essentially how they can modify, change, update the cost of living adjustment so that it would try to go ahead and save a little bit of money for the trust funds. So here are some of the things that they've created. Starting December 2025, looking at what would be, the outcome if they reduced the annual cost of living adjustment by 1 percentage point, so that those who receive benefits would receive even less of the money that they would potentially need to buy things going into the future. Another one is starting December 2025, reducing the annual cost of living adjustment by only 0.5 percentage point. So they're starting to mathematically figure out how much less they can give you as recipients of your benefits based off of reducing the increased amount that they were supposed to give you in the next year. Starting December 2025, compute the COLA using a changed version of the Consumer Price Index for wage and salary workers, CPI-W. We estimate this new computation will reduce the annual cost of living adjustment by 0.3 percentage points on average. Starting December 2027, compute the COLA using a chained version of the Consumer Price Index for wage and salary workers. We estimate the new computation will reduce the annual cost of living adjustment by about 0.3 percentage point on average. The new COLA will not apply to DI benefits. It will apply to OASI benefits, being only the retired people, except for those of formerly disabled workers who converted to retired worker status, those who stayed on SSDI benefits until they basically hit 67. What's interesting is that when I tell you guys about this stuff, some of you think I'm actually trying to scare you. Some of you think I'm trying to materialize an existence that's not that bad. No, it's worse. It's way, way worse. We are so in debt, and we've already spent the money in the form of special bonds that we need to pay benefits. Like, as a country, the politicians already spent it for the most part. There's still the little remaining in the trust funds, which, as a result of a lot of things, fertility rates dropping, people not having high enough paying jobs, cost of living is out of control, mismanaged executive level governance. There's going to be a problematic collapse. And the first collapse is the trust funds run out, because that means you won't be able to get your 100% of what you were supposed to get. And then the next collapse is, putting it very simply, right, is that you will receive significantly less. They'll continue to devalue this program. Politicians don't want to pay for this program. They don't want to pay for this program because it's really expensive. It's just one of those things where if they could find a way where Americans would not be able to get their Social Security benefits, they would be all over that. They would love that. The government is all about getting a human being in their lifespan to be educated faster, to work sooner, to earn more, to be taxed more. That's the crucial etiquette of this entire thing when the government is concerned about how the human being will live under its governance. So what you have to consider is, and we'll go back to the senator again, okay? Let's go back to him real quick, take a listen. Now remember, this is a very honest perspective. This is a very direct perspective on what he sees as coming forward. And you got to remember with this whole situation, the reason this is occurring is because he understands the very basic principles of borrowing money from Social Security using what are called special bonds and not having the money to pay it back. And what will happen as a result of potential riots going forward. And that's what we're dealing with here. And don't think the VA people are in any better situation. I'm going to be doing a video specifically on them, where the VA had to seek from Congress billions of dollars as an emergency funding so that VA benefits could continue. It is absolutely horrendous how poorly they've actually managed this. But let's go back to the senator real quick and take a listen again, now that we have a little bit of background understanding exactly what's going on.
This is all a scam. I mean, we got people that's getting ready to retire that's going to try to live off $2,000 to $3,000. Impossible. It's impossible. Because what happens, it comes up here, we spend it. We're $35 trillion in debt. We don't have union money. We're dead broke. And then taxpayers have $2 trillion in credit card debt. We are in huge trouble. In this body, we had better start figuring that out, because we're going to have a run on this city here soon, and there's going to be about 150 million people coming up here saying, where's our damn money that we paid in? I could have put my Social Security money for 40 years in tax in the market and probably be worth 8 to 10 million today. But the federal government wasted it. So I'll get off my horse there. It's good that we have this, because we got, I get a pension check from education. I was part of a union. It's not going to help people. People are going to have to continue to work longer and longer. Am I right, Ms. Gender? Can you say something about Social Security and it being taxed for some reason? We're taxing people for the second time on Social Security that they put into an account.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out when Social Security was first founded, those who established it was started out as a 2% tax, and they said this will never take more than 6% of your income. Today, it takes 12.4%. And depending on whether you go with CBO or Social Security trustees, it needs to take between 15.8 and 17.5%. So we're talking about thousands of dollars more per year. It also was actually only originally recommended.
Okay, so just to solidify, it took Trump a little bit of time to catch on with what was going on, but he realized the double taxation on the retired is absolute insanity. Harris then realized she has to jump on board. The in-between time between essentially when Trump said he was going to go ahead and make sure that the retired were not double taxed, an unconstitutional tax for the most part. In between that time and when Harris said that she believed that she would also do that, every single group out there that provided news, understanding, assessment said, "How dare Trump? How dare Trump?" That's not Trump's idea. It's not this senator's idea. It's a Democrat idea to go ahead and get rid of taxation on essentially, the elderly, the disabled, because, when you earn over a certain amount, they can tax 50%. They can even tax up to 85% of your retirement benefits. But what's interesting is that only in moments throughout the government's history, when people of great power are seeking you to make a choice to love them, to join them on the podium of executive order, only in those moments where they're the most fragile and they need the most, are they willing to start giving you stuff that you need. And this is the problem. This is why Social Security fails. This is why the federal government cannot be trusted with that much money from the American population when it comes to an account that they're supposed to hold on to and not spend. Because what do? Well, they got the accounting wrong. That was the first thing. And then number two, they create special bonds from the money you pay in to then pay for other stuff, which means like a bank, when you go and give the bank your money, they then loan your money out, which is essentially what's happening. They create these special bonds, which are a loan. And then when they mature over 10 years, 15 years, whatever set is the actual date, they have to pay those loans back with interest. But now the U.S. can't afford it. So they have to go ahead and print money, or they have to take out a further loan to pay for the loan. So the ironic thing about this is that the Social Security system was slowly changing to be worse and worse for the American people. Started as a 2% tax. Now we're up to 17+% tax. Started out as something that was supposed to just keep the retirement so that they had money in case they didn't have money, right? The idea was the federal government was going to make sure the elderly, along with pensions, along with, savings, stuff like that, had money set aside when they were older and could no longer work. It was a totally different mental landscape back then. Remember, 1930s. Realistically, 1920s, they were talking about it. 1930s, they were actually looking to make this happen. They did, and they had to figure out how they were going to do it. They used a tax clause, and that's what kind of screwed over the American people. But what's interesting about this is that you have to go back then. Think about that. Back in the 1920s, America was trying to figure out how to treat its citizens better. Because it was like, okay, look. These people are getting old. They don't have money. Huge burden on the family members. And that's when it happened. They realized that because people kind of suck at saving, and some groups of people just couldn't save. Because remember, back then, it was very unfair for women. It was much more unfair for women. Women had to have more of a support role, right? And nowadays, much less of a support role. So what happened? Because they're paying into Social Security just like the men are, but back in the day it wasn't like that. So what's interesting about this? Dana Webb, thank you for the $2 donation. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Love little pair. That's awesome. Very awesome. So what's interesting about this is that America at least had the facial expression of care for the American citizens back in the 1930s, even the 1920s, because it knew that it had to take care of its citizens in order to win wars. Because, right, what was happening during that era? World War I, and then we were transitioning into right? 1930s, 1940s, World War II against the epic enemy of Germany, right? So what was interesting is America was saying, you know what? We need the best soldiers. We need the best, this and that. We need to take care of our Americans, because if we don't have great Americans, we're not going to be able to draft people into this system and then create a great military. So America said, okay, look, if we want great soldiers, we want a great military. And on top of that, we basically want these citizens to have enough money to continue to go ahead and live their life and not put a financial time drag on the working class. Then what do we have to do? Well, we have to tax them and save the money and then give it to them when they're older. And that's what the first step was. The first step was retirement. Second step, right? These are the big steps, would be disability, 1950s, right? So it took you another 20 years to say, well, look, old people, they're not able to work. We got to cover them. 20 years go by. Disabled people, they're not able to work. We got to cover them. But remember, disabled people, with that whole situation, the disabled back then were a totally different class of individuals. You didn't really see in the origin of disability benefits all the same mental impairments that you would see today. Like, there just weren't that many people with anxiety and depression that they were able to claim at that level. So the reality is that America had a full shift in those types of impairments that you would see. Nowadays we have a very different stylistic approach. I've been in this business a really long time. So when I was working for the other firms, you would see on TV all the time now, men in dresses and, fake body enhancements and things like that. And, changing their name and, demanding pronouns and things like that. 15 years ago, when I started in this industry, we had medical terms for those individuals, and we knew mentally what they fit into for the listing level criteria. But now it's different. America has shifted immensely. Now we have lots of individuals that are in the mental category, what we call the 12.0s for listing level criteria. But we're then opening the space to say some of these individuals don't have gender dysphoria, things like that. And I think there's good and bad in that too, because some people are born a certain way and they're just going to be that way, and it is what it is. But back in the day, we didn't view them that way. Back in the day, it was, this person is not part of the norm, and therefore we're giving them a diagnostic impression under the mental impairments. Now, the physical has also evolved immensely. If you guys take a chance to actually look back and study, right, there were certain things, right? Overweight had its own, listing level details, and there were just a different world of impairments that were available. And so what's interesting about it is that if you see the evolution of how medicine has significantly moved us forward in repairing human beings and fixing things, there's tons of people who would normally be on disability benefits, but for modern day MRI imaging telling us, okay, here's the problem, we're going to treat it. Along with that, right, certain types of surgeries going in, microscopic abilities to go ahead and change it. It's a totally different world than 15 years ago, when these things were just starting to really become, capable of doing these amazing things. A lot of it is robotic technology, camera technology, and then basically training. A lot of, when you look at an industry like medicine's a pretty quick moving industry. It's pretty quick. It still takes the industry individuals, the doctors, right, to go ahead and learn and then culturally accept these new methods of actually doing something. So what's interesting about it is that if you look at the evolution of this entire thing and where it's going, it's not sustainable. And that's because there's so many more people claiming disability benefits than, realistically we can afford at our current growth rate as a country. And so there's this pandemic going on, not COVID, but mental impairment pandemic. Biden, whose pre-White House website was amazing. And it's sad that he just didn't get to really do a lot of that. You know what I mean? But the bottom line is that he promoted the idea, because we have this terrible situation with mental impairment, that, we have to go ahead and find a way to get a lot of family members to be paid to take care of those individuals, and the physical, physically limited as well. And what was so interesting about that idea, what was so interesting about how this whole thing works, right, is that to be fair with it and the evolution of it, we have to kind of understand like what the government was doing behind the scenes with what they wanted from the American people, right? There's this shifting notion from the United States government from we want ready soldiers to we don't want to pay for these people. We want to pay for these people because we'll have ready to go soldiers who we can draft to we've got enough soldiers. People are still pretty happy with the military. We can fight a war and win a war. We have new technologies. We don't really need these American people to be that healthy, right? Because otherwise, they would across the board set us up on Medicare. Across the board, they make sure that we'd have health insurance. Because when it hits the fan, we need to have basically ready and willing people to go ahead and fight for this country. Charlton Zimmerman said back in the 50s, mental illness wasn't a disability. You were put into an insane asylum. So it technically it was, but it just wasn't viewed the same way. And you're right. And so like you just have to a little bit of shifting the words. Back in the day, people that were considered mentally unsound, right? They would do all these experiments, literally driving rods into the face, okay? And, these lobotomies, things. What would happen is these really, it's almost like Cold War Russia-esque, like scary shit, World War II kind of scary shit. And what would happen is these individuals, they would do these experiments on them. They would lose any emotional spectrum, right? When they would do these things. And then as a result of that would so-called cure the individual, which obviously didn't cure them. It just made them emotionless. They just could not, they had tendencies of, psychopathic, like lacking of emotion, can't register emotion, Now, but the differences between those is that some individuals would go ahead and create emotions as an acting skill to, basically show other people that they were normal because they had emotion. But then at the same time, you had other people where they experimented on them and they removed their ability to create an acting skill of an emotion so that other people think they're normal. And so, that's one of those really interesting things about the evolution of some of these mental impairments over time, which is it's just such an interesting study. The thing I think which is relevant with this situation is that America has lost its appreciation for its citizens. So much so that many of the politicians, specifically on the Democrat side, and they're not wrong. It's just shitty, but it's probably what we're going to have to do. They're saying, look, we are, as a result of fertility rates, giving up on Americans to create the future soldiers that will defend this country, the future workers that will pay for this country. We are in some part giving up on those people. And we are now seeking mass immigration of bringing in as many people as we can to fill that void. We're going to be doing another video where we actually watch the video of those particular politicians talking about it. Pale Rider 747, thank you for the $5 donation. Love the little foxy dog. That's awesome. Very, very cool. That is awesome. Very nice. Very cool. So what's going to happen now, from my perspective of this, is that we have two roads we can go down. We can go down the we appreciate Americans road, or we can go down the we don't really need Americans road. Okay, right now we're really hard. We're hard tilt. We are full lean, right? In the we don't really need Americans side, where we're just mass importing immigrants, trying to get as many in as possible. Because, it benefits one particular, political party immensely, right? So you're going to see massive vote farming. You're going to see, a lot of people going ahead and seeking, becoming Americans. It increases the amount of Americans and then increases the amount of work product and then increases, down the line, the amount of taxable income that can come from it. But what's interesting with this situation, like if we just really settle it into a little ball and like say, okay, where are we at? The government is sort of like this child. And if the child doesn't like, right, its toys, the people, the American citizens, it will go ahead and try to find other ways to seek what it wants from, right, those toys. So let me give you an example. You're probably thinking, okay, what do you mean? Okay, what do you go back to our wars that we had in this country, right? You would have a war where, like, individuals who were enslaved would fight in the war to achieve their freedom, right? That's kind of like almost like immigrants of today. You're bringing in a group that traditionally would not be sought as the American classic soldier, but you're bringing in a group, somebody else, right? Something other than the classic American soldier. And you're promoting and proffering them into this idea, this like system that they're going to fight for America. And so what's happening is, you can look at it many ways. America is either vote farming massively, which I think they are. I think the Democratic Party has realized that it doesn't matter what they try to sell to the American people, so long as they can just stay in power, right? That's the thing. That's if a party can stay in power by doing something that doesn't benefit the American people, it's going to do it. It's going to promote doing that exact same thing. Is it great that we have completely open borders for the most part, and then they get clamped down right before the election? We all know what that is. We know that it's not great for America. We know that's going to create a lot of violence. It's going to create a lot of financial problems. It's going to create basically a lot of cultural issues. But America knows that it's not going to have any issue paying for those people's SSI benefits. No, those SSI benefits are going to pay left or right from general taxes, which tells you that America is full tilt in understanding that they would rather do something that's negative for the American people to promote the idea of getting reelected and having future soldiers than working with the American people to make sure that they're taken care of. Because if we were to work with the American people and make sure we were creating better future potential soldiers, let's call it like it is, we would be making sure that those trust funds were full to go ahead and continue to pay the full amount of benefits. We wouldn't be screwing around. And that's the amazing thing. That's why when the Republicans go and say, hey, you keep talking about all this stuff you're going to do, why don't you just do it? You're in office right now. And that's the beautiful thing, is that most people have been trained mentally to believe that in order to do these things, it's almost like an impossible, can't be overcome situation. It's just so impossible, unrealistic. And yet other countries do it all the time. They fix these problems and get them, rolling in the right direction very easily. Now, let's go back to this video real quick. Now that you have an understanding as to like the soldier theory, what Americans are worth, how they view us, all that stuff. Let's go back to it real quick. Hold on. Because it's interesting. So we get to this lady, right? This lady then gives us a summation as to historically what Social Security benefits were originally. But remember, now we live in a totally different world where they don't value us and they want to reap as much money away from us as possible. Okay, so here we go.
Percent tax, and they said this will never take more than 6% of your income. Today it takes 12.4%, and depending on whether you go with CBO or Social Security trustees, it needs to take between 15.8 and 17.5%. So we're talking about thousands of dollars more per year. It also was actually only originally recommended that the tax be up to $66,000, equivalent in today's dollars of earnings. But over time it has expanded massively, and the money has been spent every year. So whereas everybody thinks this money's been set aside for me, no, for the past 13 years, every dollar that has gone out of workers' paychecks has gone immediately to pay promised benefits. And that's what happens when you have a system that enables those in charge of it to spend the money in the immediate term and leave the buck to the next generation that's coming along. And because Social Security has grown so much, it's actually to the detriment of lower income workers in particular, who have to pay such a large share of their paycheck to Social Security. They have little left to save for retirement. And then lower income and African-American workers have the lowest life expectancies. So they are the most likely to get nothing back in return. 1 out of 4 African-American men will die between the ages of 45 and 64 after having paid into this system for decades, tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they might get nothing back.
What's the solution?
I think we ultimately have to shift towards a universal benefit system. That's what true social insurance is. It does not make sense that we are paying the biggest benefits to the highest income earners. So gradually over time, I think we need to bend down the benefits for the middle and upper income earners, actually increase them for the lower income earners. Look at things like indexing retirement age to life expectancy, more accurate inflation index, And I think that workers need an option to have their money in something that actually earns a positive rate of return and that can't just immediately be spent by Congress.
I have a 28, 29-year-old, 2 boys.
Okay, so a lot was covered there, but here's what they're saying. They're saying Congress can't be trusted with your money. Loud and clear. And it can. I mean, to be fair, they've blown through it. We're 35. They can't be trusted with your money. They can't. Why are they trusted with your money? That's because in 1937, they ruled that it was legalized through the tax provision of the Constitution. But also, it's because you don't have a legal right to the money that you pay 15 to 17% off of every paycheck into the United States government. But if you did, they would have to take that money and put it into a special account for you because you would have a legal right to be able to access it as opposed to what we have right now. Now, what they're talking about is this. They are heavily looking into how they're going to reshape Social Security benefits in the future, which means that people who, earned middle class, middle upper class amounts of money are probably going to get less Social Security benefits in the future because they're going to give more of that money that they paid in to lower earning individuals, which is going to massively piss off all the middle class and up people because they paid in more. Now, they will argue, well, we should get rid of the cap on this thing. We should tax everybody all the way up past $168,000 so that essentially all those people who earn more pay, basically 15 to 17% on all of their earned income. The kicker with that is that you run into corporations and mega earners who switch and change the method by which they receive money so that they mostly receive investment income as opposed to, you guessed it, traditional income. Now, the problem, aside from that whole shifting of money, is that we have major corporations in America, kind of like Apple Computers and other places as well, where they play the tax game and they shelter in different nations, like Ireland or whatever, to go ahead and not get hit with as much tax. Now, why is that important? It's important because if these mega corporations paid their real fair share of income, right, we wouldn't have a problem. Ultimately, the middle class and the upper class and everybody above that is going to have to lose more money to pay for the poor, which is not going to be popular because that's taking this socialist program and then pushing it another level towards, basically, socialism on the left. You're taking it even more to the left. So imagine, let's say that you got a $2,000 check every month, and instead we said, well, look, we're only going to give you $1,800 per month because we want to give that extra $200 to a poor person who has a lower amount of benefits so that we have a standardized amount of benefits that all the poor people under a certain amount should be getting, which is that universal benefit idea. Now, here's the problem. America is not a country of socialists. It's just not. America is not a country of, classic communists. It's just not that. America is that middle ground on its way to capitalism becoming imperialism. So here's the problem. When you have too much capitalism that's not checked, you end up with monopolies. When you have not enough capitalism that is, basically unchecked by the government, you end up with communism. We're kind of like middle right as the way our economic policies go, and we push even more to the right every single day because corporations that are successful, they keep reaping more benefits, reaping more money, and they go ahead and buy out other ideas, other corporations, and they control the marketplace. The more control you have on the marketplace, you either end up with one devil or the other devil. The one devil is a monopoly. The other devil, right, is basically the government. So if you end up with a monopoly, right, on there's a lot of things that could be monopolies, for example, Disney, you could consider that to be a quasi-monopoly, right? And then the other end, you have the United States federal government, which is, one of the big time employers of many U.S. citizens. So the reality with this whole structure that we have is that America continues to move closer and closer to socialism in application, which means that more people who earn more will see less of the money that they're actually putting into America, which means that we have less incentive for people to kick ass, make money, make new products, innovate, do amazing things. And when that happens, the likelihood that people are going to work and achieve decreases. And what happens is, as technology increases for being able to move from place to place without issue, right? I'm not just talking about a car. I'm talking about when we have parking lots that are technically called airport terminals. It's not a big parking lot. It's like a literal random parking lot in the middle of Kentucky, in the middle of a field. And that's called a literal terminal airport, because you'll be able to walk there, get into an automated humanless drone that will then fly you to some other country, you know what I mean, to go on some event, some action, see something, and then come back 5 days later. What you're going to find is that Americans are going to leave en masse. Why? It's way too expensive to live here. A lot of the food in other places is just healthier. And to be fair, there are some places that are massively beautiful. So when you show these places, so like I'm in New Jersey right now, you know, there's a lot of negative parts of New Jersey, like Newark, right? I'm in the farmland of New Jersey, which is where I grew up on a farm. Beautiful area. It's the most beautiful area of New Jersey. It's more beautiful than any other spot I've ever seen in Pennsylvania or New York. It's just weird. There's this little gem right by the Delaware Wind Gap, right by the Delaware Water Gap, right by the Poconos, most beautiful rounded hill countryside. But the rest of New Jersey, there's some problems, right? There's some good spots, but there's definitely some problems. So the thing is this, when you show somebody from Newark, right, a beautiful spot in South America where it costs literally a third to live there, what do you think those retired people are going to do when they get their check? Well, if they can travel easily in and out of this country, they're going to get the hell out of this country, and they're going to do it real fast because they're going to realize that there's something better out there. The greatest thing that America can do to keep the most money from Social Security benefits staying in this country is to not allow Americans to see what's outside of it. Let me give you an example. The ultimate initial version of the passport bros are, you guessed it, veteran males. They fight in a war. They know the area where the war was fought. They know what happened over there. They know buddies that are still over there. They go over and marry some beautiful woman over there. They have their VA check. They have their SSDI check. They live a very good life. They have a very good time, a very good time. Thailand, right? Taiwan, right? Places like that. The point that I'm getting at is America, I expect, is going to be very cautious about allowing American citizens, especially the retired, en masse, to move outside of the country or visit outside of the country. And one of the things that they can do to make sure that Americans aren't going out and vacationing and seeing these places is to control their financial capabilities. And if you reduce the amount of money that people have to spend when they're retired, they can't vacation to other places then. And they're stuck where they're stuck. And if you can train their brain to think, well, if I just stay here with the house that I paid into my entire life and wait for it to become more and more and more, then I'll sell it at the right time. And that's the kicker. If you can find a way to get Americans to not own homes where they have to rent, and then basically not have the ability to sell their home somewhere down the line, right? So we're talking 20, 30 years down the line, right? Not the current retired, but the future retired, 20, 30 years down the line. If you can get those people to not have a house, you can convince them, oh, renting is better. Rent where you're going to live for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about that fridge that breaks. You don't have to worry about that weird thing with the wall. Call the owner, have them deal with it. You don't want to have to deal with that. If you can convince a large enough part of the population to believe that, they will, when they become retired, have zero big money nest egg. If you can do that, you are assured that they're going to spend their Social Security benefits repetitively in this country. Scary shit, really scary stuff. Now, as a result of that, I want you to understand the way I look at Social Security benefits is that they're not going to be around in the form that they are in the future. They ain't even going to be in the form that they are probably within the next 2 weeks because they keep changing the rules in a hyper quick way. When I was actually interning and working with other law firms, they didn't change rules like this. There were hardly ever changes to the Social Security rules. It was a very slow process. They didn't do a lot of changes. They just stuck with the system they have. Now, every damn week, there's a major change, which is good for somebody like me who does YouTube videos on like what's happening, what's going on. But I would have never been able to do this back in the day because there just weren't that many changes. I wouldn't be able to do the news side of like what's going on in the news today with Social Security. They just didn't have that many changes. Now it's like we're getting hammered every day. There's a new change around the corner. There's a new thing coming up. There's an emergency message released by the Commissioner of the Social Security Administration. It's every day now that they're just constantly coming out with stuff. The government is shaping this so that the population has to stay inside the United States, spend their Social Security benefits inside the United States, and not move to cheaper, more beautiful places. But imagine that when we have automated, humanless driving drones that can pick you up in the middle of a field where there's a little spot that is, just a blacktop, right? Blacktop parking lot, right? Boom. They pick you up there. They can take you outside of the country. You go to another country. Everything's automated, right? You don't need to bring anything because everything's automated. They're going to be able to read your fingerprint, and your money is going to be linked to your fingerprint. Your specialty cards, your identification, your transactional accounts, all that stuff, your bitcoins, all boop right in your fingertip. When you have that capacity to move to another country that easily, you're not going to see any retired people living here. There's no reason why. I mean, look at, and here's my proof. Walter, I don't know, maybe not. Here's my proof. What happened when this country was piss poor managed? Then we had, basically that in combination. So, okay, COVID happened. RVs became extremely expensive. There's these houseboats. They're super poorly made. I forget what they're called. Let me see if I can figure them out. They're like American Adventure houseboat. Let me see if I can find you what it is. The price is skyrocketed on these things. Let me see if I can find this. I'm not going to be able to find it. All right. So there were these little houseboats, and I wanted one. You could pick one up for like $12K, right? You could get one. But then when COVID hit, those little houseboats where you can go to a lake and just sit in the boat and hang out for a weekend, those houseboats went up to $40,000 and $50,000. Same thing with the RVs. If you had an RV during COVID, you were a king. You were a queen. You were living like you had a golden nugget on wheels that you could just drive that puppy around. That was the sauciest nugget. You saw an RV during that time. You're like, ooh, that person's got money. That person's got a lot of money right there. But now they came back down. Why did this happen? Well, you had a lot of things going on. You had mishandling with petrodollar, mishandling of oil. You had COVID, right? People are getting sick. They were trying to go out and venture. They didn't have to work because they were getting a check either way. I worked, by the way. I worked through the entire COVID experience because if I didn't work, the company would have just died. A lot of people forget about that. The owners during COVID, they still had to keep it all running, right? Not just the lights on. We had to keep that shit with a heartbeat, right? So the reality here of this thing is that in the future, when people, basically are trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, they're getting older, they don't want to work anymore, I can guarantee you that the prices of RVs are going to go way up until people can't afford them. And then they're going to start coming back down again. And the reason why is that people inherently, Americans, we're adventurers. We want to go see. Yes, you're going to have some people that live in the city and they're like, I like my little, 10 square foot by 10 square foot bedroom, and I don't want to look outside too much, but I like hearing sirens all the time. You're always going to have those people, but that's not the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans, they want to go and see the world. So when that technology comes out to go see the world, you're going to be seeing autonomous drones dropping people off all over the place. And that's going to be the new form of an RV. And that's going to be incredible. And when that happens, America, the greatest threat to traditional Social Security benefits being used to pump prime the economy by old people living in the U.S., constantly paying all their money into food and things like that in the U.S., that's going to end because they're going to be spending their money in other places. And that's not what the government wants. Government wants its farm animals to stay in the farm. So I wanted to give you this video. I wanted to show you why this video was so relevant to the whole riot situation of what Americans will do when their Social Security benefits are taken away. It's an interesting study because culturally, the way the government treats us dictates to us how much they expect us to become soldiers to fight a war for them. But what they're saying now is that they don't really want us that bad. Now they're going to change their tune because when Biden came in, Biden was like he was like the antimatter to the military. His ideas, because remember, military is rah, 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 get her done. And Biden came in and his thing was like, it's okay to be a failure. It's okay to be whatever you want in life. And those two are contradictory. You need both, but they're contradictory. Obviously the military wants to whoosh, you're going to push it through, right? You have to make this thing, you have to get through this, achieve your mission. So what happened, is that there was a cultural shock. And people didn't want to join the military for America because people didn't like what America was anymore. They said, and not all people, but the military mentality of hoorah, right? Work out just because you want to be the person you want to be for the moment when the firefight breaks out, right? Be that person. And so what's interesting about it is that it decreased the amount of soldiers they were able to obtain to give their lives for an idea of a country that exists. And that's the thing, is America has always been like a described, we are these locations on a map. But the only way you can sell somebody, like Apple computers, they've got great advertising, amazing advertising. But the only way you can sell somebody to give up their life for a country is by having incredible advertising. And Biden is the opposite of incredible advertising for the United States military. Absolutely terrible for it. Because he represents things that are counter to military mentality, which is, freedom, through force, and basically making others have to respect the capabilities of American soldiers. American soldiers, just so you guys are all aware, are widely considered across many of the other militaries as super soldiers. They're big dudes, they're tough dudes. Same with the women. You know what I mean? When they get into a firefight, many of them, instead of running, many Americans in that mental mode will literally gear up full tilt and lay as much lead as they can down that field. And then they will call in as much, anything they can get, artillery, whether it's air support, whatever, they will engage it. They're not running away, right? Many other military units are like, okay, well, there's something going on over here. We're going to get that way, right? We're going to go away. Not the U.S. military. The U.S. military is like, you know what we're going to do? This group just shot at us, right? This group that was part of that town. So by next Thursday, we're going to take over the entire country. That's America. That's always been America. That's how America works. Now, that obviously, that hoorah mentality gets them in trouble with the ethical, moral police, right? How could you do this? You might have hit somebody that you shouldn't have. You've gone too far. But a lot of Americans live in, unfortunately, a state of mental misunderstanding. A lot of Americans don't realize now that every country is trying to consume other countries around it. Immigrants are actually worth a lot to us. It's a human being that can be trained to work to pay taxes that the government can borrow against. Immigrants are worth something, right? So the thing is, big countries are always consuming whatever they can get, whether they want certain raw materials, certain finished materials, certain trade routes to be established. They're always basically setting up things to massively take from other countries. And these countries are all trying to consume each other and eat each other and take dominance over each other. It's none of this ethical, moral, fluffy bun, sugar nuggets kind of thing. It's none of that. It's pure, can this country beat that country in a war? This country has this asset and that country wants it. How is that country going to take it from this country? That is the rule of the literal country by country jungle that we live in. There's no cutesy ethical, moral, this or that. It's purely what can you get away with to commit crime? And that's what countries are. That's what presidents are. Presidents are the leader of a country, which means they can legally commit murder. You ever just sit back and think about that? Like how crazy that is? The US, through its president, because of the president owning a country, can commit murder. No restrictions. In a military sense, commit murder. And that's because there's no way in a civilized society to have civilized brains also be a part of the identity of the military achievement complex. These two have to be separated because this has to kick ass and take, and this has to play the what's fair card. So as a result of that, I think Americans will, over the next 5 to 10 years, go up in value to the government as we see China continue to grow in its capacity to go ahead and do things. And China, even though it's financially having these issues here and there, China is doing amazingly well with its rocket science, its space endeavors, and its ability to go ahead and continue to build particle accelerators, its ability to go ahead and have and attract scientists from all over the world. There's a lot of scientists coming out of these top-level, universities, and China's grabbing them left and right, and they're bringing them into the fold, and they're giving them all these benefits because China understands the value of hyperintelligence. And I'll tell you this: one of the ironic things about my genetics, my family line, is that through Germany, Austria, Ukraine, things like that, back in the day, my family was specifically used by different governments to achieve certain things. Weren't treated well. We ended up having to leave, these countries and places because it wasn't safe for us. But that's what happened. And so the thing is, America has lost sight on valuing its citizen, and it's mostly focused on valuing its poorest individuals over its middle class. And the weird thing is, when you look at how the whole thing works, the most important people in the spectrum of all Americans are the middle class. They keep the lights on, they make it work, they make it continue to happen. If you lose the middle class, the whole thing fails. You can lose a lot of the lower, income earners, you can lose a lot of the higher income earners, but if you lose the middle class, it's over. That's it. It doesn't happen. America doesn't continue. So it's weird that we continue to funnel so much money into programs that don't fix poverty, and we take all that money from the middle class, which is the group that could achieve and be so successful and do all these amazing things. Because if you ever sit back and think about it, what happens to the middle class when you tax them less? They become usually upper class. So what the government does is they tax them as much as they can to keep them in the spot where they are. And they do that by saying, oh, well, we got to pay for all the poor. We got to pay for all of the retired. We got to pay for all the disabled. And then what happens is that massive amount of taxation causes the middle class to continue to be in the rotation wheel, working their entire life. We have to, at some point, go back to focusing more on specifically how we cater to the middle class. Because if we don't have a strong middle class, we lose a war. That's the reality. If we don't have a strong middle class, we lose a war. The middle class has a lot of the educated people in it. It has a lot of the people capable of doing incredible things when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to working, machines that make items. The middle class is what we as a country abuse the most. And it's also the thing that only keeps us glued together. Because the poverty individuals, they don't keep America glued together. Right. So if you're saying, well, the poverty people, they're the ones who clean this, or they're the ones who throw out the trash, or da-da-da-da-da-da. Yes, you're right. But you can take the middle class people and have them do those same jobs. You can. That's the thing. A lot of people never think about that. And it sounds unethical and absolutely terrible and immoral. And how can we say those things? But think about it. You can take any middle class individual, right? And for the most part, have them do low income earning jobs. You can take most middle class individuals and have them do most higher earning jobs. They're stuck in that middle. And the rich say, oh, we can't afford to pay. We got to have these other investment types of income that doesn't get taxed as much. So the middle class has to pay. And the poverty individuals, we can't afford this. We can't do this. Blah, 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 blah. So the middle class has to pay. So what this politician is really getting at, what this politician is really showing at the end of the day is that Americans are likely to go into a state of riot. Because when you look at the middle class, right? And the middle class, and the middle class doesn't even know this yet. They haven't even realized this, right? The middle class, a lot of the middle class would watch this video and be like, that's fear mongering. How dare you? Right? The rah, both hands up, doing the shake, the whole thing. They go through. So the middle class would just be like, there's no way. How could this be? I can't believe this. I've been paying to this my whole life. But that's the thing. Those individuals are taught to perform the function of what they're supposed to do. Now, what has changed all that? Social media. Social media has taught the middle class how to go and achieve and do what the upper class does. Buy properties, rent them. Buy properties, sell them. How to trade stocks, how to trade bonds, how to trade this, how to trade that. What's the future of this? What to expect? It's changed it. The middle class now are going to achieve, many of them, that upper class status. They are, because YouTube has now given them the tools and the education platform of a DIY situation, a practical application of how to do it. And now what you're going to be seeing is you're not going to be seeing a lot of the middle class stuck in the middle class. They're going to go up. They're going to have to go up. But you're also going to have individuals that don't put in the effort. And just like the way capitalism works, they're going to go into the lower income. These are things we don't really talk about. These are things that we don't actually go into as a country. And that's because in the underlying crust of it, America doesn't want its citizens to get out of middle class. They want them to sit there, work the jobs, get taxed heavily. That's what they want. If America wanted everybody to be rich, they'd have a problem. Because if most of the Americans are rich, then most of those Americans are not going to be wanting to actually work jobs. They're going to want to pay people to work jobs. And America is still in its current state, because we don't have AI at that point. We don't have robots at that point. But in its current state, we still need lots of humans to do lots of jobs. That's changing, though. You can have AI do most functions now. You go into a Wendy's or a McDonald's drive-through, they have AI bots communicate with you and pull your order up and actually put it into the computer, and then somebody there will cross-check it and press the go button. 3 years, 4 years, AI will start to replace most of the lower income earning jobs. And then 5 years, 10 years, it'll replace many of the middle income earning jobs. And then at that point, what do we have? We got a big problem. So I will catch you in the next video where we actually go over what politicians are talking about. They just had a Social Security hearing where they had a bunch of politicians lined up talking specifically about what's happening with Social Security. I want you to watch this video with me, and I want to talk with you about specifically what they go over in it, because it starts to frame for you all the things that I've been saying, but it's coming from their lips. And the reason this is important is that I don't want you to ever have to de facto trust me. I want you to question what I say. But in questioning it, I want you to see these other politicians, these authority-like figures, explaining the exact same thing from their perspective and how they are trying to boost Social Security benefits for minorities with particular skin color, for individuals who have been low-income earners for an extended period, for people that are females. So what does that really mean? It means that there's going to very likely be a prejudice against white males in the future for Social Security benefits. And that is an idea, a doctrine being pushed in these chambers of the government to try and create a more magical, perfect balance. It's an interesting thing. It's very, very interesting as to how this thing is evolving. So I will catch you guys at the next video. You'll get to kind of see what's going on. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like these updates where we actually cover, details about what's going on. Please remember to go to Disability Resolution. Again, Disability Resolution Law Firm on Google. Throw some stars up there for the reviews. I will catch you at the next video. Give me about 15 minutes, and we'll go ahead and pull up. Also, Mondays and Thursdays, I go live. Today is, of course, what is today? Today is Friday night. But Mondays and Thursdays, I go live to answer questions. If you want to do one of those hours, a private session where I run hearing questions with you, or you figure out what your transition from working to being on disability benefits will look like, whatever it is, you have CDI units investigating you, that's fine. Little mini contract is in the bio below. I will catch you at the next video in about 15 minutes, and we will go from there, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you a little bit later. Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.